Alright, another draft physics presentation and such. Comments, mostly. And, shitty comments, mostly, but whatever. Okay, John Smith. Okay, so if I enter a deep cave and shield myself from outside pressures as the cave absorbs energy coming down at me, how come I don't weigh less or float inside the cave? Just want to understand. I'm not a physicist. These rules are the same for their theory as my theory. Again, you're not getting it. There's a thing called the inverse square law, and certainly the mechanics of it change dramatically when you start going inside of a piece of matter, because the point is gravity is like a nuclear force, as I've pointed out. The little tiny bits create it. And so if you bore through the Earth's crust, you then are in between two planets, essentially. It's like you being between the moon and the Earth. There's a point between the moon and the Earth where there's no gravity. The two poles are equal, and you won't be pulled one way or the other way. And the same thing happens as you start boring into the Earth, as you start changing the balance of matter above you relative to below you, and so the force starts to balance. But you really won't notice it at 10 feet or 15 feet. The Earth is 4,000 miles diameter. You have to go some significant percentage, a couple of miles, before you're really going to start to notice any decrease in the gravity. But it will be there. But the problem is there's chemical pressures at those levels, so you're going to be a lot less concerned about the fact that you weigh 2 pounds less, and you're going to be a lot more concerned with the fact that you're under chemical pressure, the atmosphere or whatever you're going to experience under there, water. You're going to feel incredible pressure because of the mass that's above you is being gravitationally pushed towards the center of the Earth, and that is creating chemical pressure. So the pressure is going to crush you before you're going to notice a significant difference in your standing gravity. But again, this has nothing to do with my theory versus their theory. They see it exactly the same way. If you ask Feynman, what happens if I make a hollow Earth and I punch through the core of the Earth, the surface of the Earth, and I go into the hollow part, he's going to explain to you there's no gravity. Wherever you go, there's no gravity, because it'll be equal amounts of mass on either side of you, and the proportion of your exposure, because it's still a sphere. So as long as it's a sphere. So if the Earth is a hollow sphere, there won't be any gravity inside of it. So you won't be able to walk on the inside surface of the Earth or something like that. Won't work. No gravity. It's like no charge inside a Faraday cage, if you've heard of that. Same kind of principle. Okay. I think did I finish this? Don't weigh the same inside the cave. Just want to understand, I'm not a physicist. Well, again, it's okay not to be a physicist, and it's okay to ask questions, I suppose, but it seems like you're doing it in kind of a snarky manner, and with a presumption that somehow regular physics has a different answer than my answer. And in that case, there's no difference. So that's the catch with bent space. It really doesn't make sense to think that how much space is getting bent, as you go inside the Earth, that you're changing how much space is being bent based on how much Earth there is on one side of you or Earth there is on the other side. It's where bent space sort of breaks down, because it's no longer center of gravities. Another reason not to believe the standard model is correct. Is comment viewable? Yes, it is. Okay. So, a guy who labels himself "fuck you," no doubt it's the cowboy or whatever, one of the 3 trolls who have nothing better to do with their life than write this crap and just continue to keep pointing out other liars and unaccountable liars. If you're going to lie, you should put your name on it. You should have the courage to do that. You're going to lie about somebody else, but they're too big a coward to do that. Where is your recognition, DraftScience? ? Hurry up. I can't wait for it. We're all waiting for it. So again, if I'm proven right, what's going to be your penance for this? this is somehow a rational argument. Everybody who disputes you has to be wrong because you're right about everything. And you're allowed to be this obnoxiously arrogant because your evidence is so voluminous. You have so much evidence that you can present to prove your case for your God theories. And that's what they are. 700 videos, 7 years, and you still haven't taken care of particle gravity causing drag. So I imagine he means drag in the sense that it causes friction to movement in some other directions besides the gravitational pull. And I have addressed it. So it's just an insane lie in the sense I have overtly addressed it over and over again. I've talked about how protons, neutrons are very different than the protons and the electrons and how they move, and that how they can absorb velocity where protons and electrons can't. I've said things like you can't make an electron gun. You can't actually shoot electrons outside of a vacuum because they all just fail. As soon as they're outside of a vacuum, they fail. And why is that? As soon as they're outside of the anode and cathode, that causes them to move, the charge difference, that they don't just keep going forever, but doesn't pay any attention. So I mean, you can say things over and over, and there's just no, it's like just no acknowledgement that you have addressed it, you have pointed out exactly how you think it works, and they just pretend, oh no, none of that happened. Oh, sorry, I don't have the microphone where it should be, so my bad. So the volume's going to change here. Shit happens, as they say. Deal with it. Yeah, I forgot I had to do video, and you know, it's not the end of the world. It won't kill you, as they say. Or as I just said again. Alright, so I will draw the so the simple explanation. So look, I think the real physics has something to do with the fact that, okay, let's just draw them in colors to make it clear for now. And so my argument is that neutrons are actually a proton and electron in close proximity, and that you can stretch neutrons. That is, you can cause their orbit to process around the proton. So the electron processes, and that in that function it can do this kind of thing through space. It will move through space because of its procession. And that is essentially when something acquires force, that's what the force is doing, is stretching the neutrons and basically creating procession in the direction of the force. So that's why things keep moving, is they essentially have a bicycle rider inside of them. You know, there's a bicycle, and there's an engine inside the matter that keeps it going. So the simplest argument would be is that the force is around every single nuclear bit. So there's no way to get away from the, if we want to call it an ether, let's call it an ether. And we're going to say that this force has a drag element to it. That is, if you're going into the force, you're going to hit more stuff. The faster you go, the more stuff you're going to hit. And so it's going to slow you down, theoretically. That is, if you don't have an engine inside of you that keeps you going at a constant speed. Now you could argue that wind resistance slows down a car, but once a car is going 60 miles an hour, and you don't have to go faster and faster and faster to make up any difference. You can just put on cruise control. Well, cruise control wouldn't be a great example, but the point is a certain amount of acceleration, a certain amount of engine energy will maintain that 60 miles an hour because you have an engine inside that keeps making it. And that's the point, is when the space shuttle pushes the space shuttle, you know, when the engines, rockets on a engine propel, you know, a rocket, the propulsion pushes the force inside the object. So the object has the velocity inside of it. It has a little engine, and that engine, no matter what force it's fighting, it can't get up to 30 miles an hour, let's say, unless it already defeated that force. It's already overcome that force, and it has the same bicycle rider inside of it. It has the same engine of keep goingness, and it already achieved the 30 miles an hour, so it just keeps the 30 miles an hour unless you provide some extra force. So the drag force, it's already compensated for. Now, if you could create a universe that didn't have this force in it, there was no drag force, it would just mean that that rocket would go faster. So instead of going 30 miles an hour, it might go 40 miles an hour if there was no drag force. But the drag force is already accounted for by the motion, because it's not like it got pushed and it's quiet now. There's nothing inside of it. It has the extra force arrows. That's the whole point. When gravity moves the Earth towards the Sun, the Earth acquires the force. And that's why if the Earth wasn't moving in an orbit around the Sun, Sun here, then the Earth would start accelerating faster and faster and faster, because the 10 meters per second would add up. They would add 10 meters plus 10 meters plus 10 meters plus 10 meters a second. It would keep adding velocity. The acceleration would continue because the arrows are being collected by the Earth. And the fact that the Earth, once it establishes a velocity, some other force you have to bring in extra force. The drag force isn't going to stop the Earth from going into the Sun. So the first 10 meters per second force will maybe get the Earth up to 7 meters per second as a speed, let's say 7 miles an hour, let's say, or some kind of number. And once it achieves that 7 miles an hour, it'll continue going 7 miles an hour if there was no more gravity. It would keep going, and it would do so against any drag that existed, because the force is in here. It's got an engine. It's maintaining its velocity because it owns a force inside of it that's going to be perpetual until something takes it away. The imbalance is inside of the Earth. So think of it as an equation of balance, and there's more arrows inside going this way, and only 2 arrows, let's say, going this way. And that's a constant condition. That's every second. Okay, of every second, of every day, of every hour, of every year. Every second it has this imbalance. And every second this imbalance will realize itself as a momentum in the forward direction. And no matter how much force is out here, the only thing the force can do is it can say this amount of imbalance equals 5 miles an hour. Or the force could say this amount of imbalance equals 10 miles an hour. Or this amount of imbalance equals 15 miles an hour. But all it will decide is what the speed will be that you get by having this much imbalance. It won't decide whether that speed will be consistent, because it will, because you've already overcome the force. You're already going as fast as the force is slowing you down. So whatever slowdown there is, it's already been revealed in the fact that you've acquired the velocity. And like I say, if you take the drag away, if you take the force away, yes, you may go faster, because this imbalance would equal a faster speed. And this is the reason why it takes a little more energy when something's going. Like the first 50 miles an hour, it might take you 10 joules of energy to go 50 miles an hour. But to go 100 miles an hour, it might take you 25. Because it'll take you more energy to get that next 50. And then to get the next 50 might cost you 50. So for each increase in speed requires more of an increase in force that you've acquired. And that would be consistent with this argument that you're always overcoming the drag, and the drag is nuclear. The drag is against the electrons movement. We're not made of
matter, quote unquote, some kind of, we're made of, like a sponge, we're made of cells. The cells are made out of chemistry. The chemistry is made out of the nuclear bits. It's the nuclear bits that have feeling this drag. And the point is the electrons and the protons and the neutrons can have biases based on the force going through them. That means they have the extra energy, and it's inside of them. They own it. Until something takes it out of them, they have it. And so, that's the general explanation. Put in simple terms, is the drag has already been overcome. It's already something the rider's compensating for, and he doesn't have to compensate more the further he goes. He always has to compensate exactly the same amount. He just has to keep the force he has against the opposing, how do you even say it? I mean, it's not really an opposing force. Again, the bottom line is that this is, all of these forces are all speed of light interactions. There aren't any material bits, force bits, essential bits, that are going less than the speed of light. So there's no way to increase how much of an interaction you have. The interaction I'm having with gravity right now is a force moving the speed of light through me is interacting with matter bits that have force in them that's also moving the speed of light. And so it's not like you can increase the magnitude of the collisions taking place. Let's see how else to say it. But again, to say I haven't addressed the issue is bullshit. And to say that, yes, your magical bent space, as a theory, doesn't carry the same obligation to explain because it doesn't have any substance at all. So you don't even have to explain how your ether, your bent space, your mechanism that's being bent, may or may not create drag, because it doesn't even have you don't give it any kind of form or substance. So I can't even make the accusation, well, how do you explain why there isn't bent space drag? How can you have this ether, this thing you're bending, and somehow it doesn't matter which direction I'm going, the bendability force doesn't create any resistance to movement? And it's only because you've used an invisible man excuse, you've used an invisible man explanation that doesn't have any physical structure, so therefore I can't pick at it. But that's it. You're not immune to the argument for any good reason. You're immune to it because your explanation is so vacant of any kind of detail, any structure at all. You've placed it in some sort of magic realm where you don't have to account for any mechanism, any triggers for the mechanism, any mechanics whatsoever. Zero mechanical structure. So yes, invisible men don't have to obey the same rules as material ones. And the same goes for a material explanation of the universe is going to be different than the one is going to be held to a different standard just by convenience to one that's religious. And so that's true. Religion can make up any kind of excuse for why there's dinosaurs in the ground. They could just say, well, God thought it was a good test. They can just make up silly nonsense. And that's your privilege. But to be arrogant when you're just making up silly nonsense, that's your choice. And I think it's the choice of a weasel. So anyway, let's see. Okay. Your insane reply, so again, he says this is insane, is basically to make believe and pretend that force doesn't exist for that case. That's just a complete lie. I've never claimed the force doesn't exist. I've said exactly the opposite. I mean, it's just lying. So bravo, you're just you're a compulsive liar. There's literally the outcome of your insane way to solve it. That's literally the outcome. Again, how so? I mean, look, like I said, it's. Let's see which. Oh, I'm still on the drawing thing, right? Yeah, so I didn't put it back on the stupid comment. All right, let's try it again from a different angle. I mean, I certainly have made the arguments that the more of your stuff that's going in a direction, it means that less of your stuff is going in other directions. So as I've tried to point out, when you're converting the bits inside of you to gain velocity, what tends to happen is that a force comes in and it converts something going perpendicular. So the force comes in, you end up releasing this red bit, and you replace it with the new bit going in the forward direction to create your bias. So you're losing these perpendicular dimensions as you're gaining velocity. So another way to look at it is, okay, let me push that into view. Alright, sorry. So the force came in, it exchanges direction with a perpendicular bit. So this bit leaves. That's your equal but opposite reaction technically. And you gain this extra arrow in the forward direction. So as you're moving, as you gain velocity, essentially what's happening is that you're becoming less hittable because you're losing all of the stuff going in the perpendicular directions, and more of the fish analogy I've used, more and more of your fish, more and more of the energy you possess, and by more and more we're talking about tiny percentages, 1% maybe 0.001% of your total energy changes its direction, and that means you're going 500 miles an hour. Just 0.001% would create that big a change, because this stuff is moving the speed of light, and so it doesn't take much of a bias to create motion. So clearly, as you start converting these perpendicular elements into forward elements, alright, you are essentially becoming less and less capable of interacting with energy coming this way. As pointed out, the head-on collision is in some ways invisible. It just depends on which element your matter decides to retain as its what it calls itself. But you can see that a head-on collision essentially equals one thing leaves the same way, the other thing leaves. It's exactly the same outcome. The outcome universe looks the same way if the two things miss each other or if the two things hit each other. And what's really being decided is what is inside of the electron or the proton. That's the question. What bit got kept by the electron or the proton, and what bit left? And if it keeps this bit, then it's going this direction. If it keeps this bit, then it's going this direction. And that's that simple. So it just depends on whether the reaction is a reflection or whether the reaction can be thought of as as it just one thing goes in, one thing goes out. I don't know. I don't see how it could possibly make a difference, but regardless. So I've made this point that essentially as you go faster, you're becoming less and less hittable. So if this is you, as this moves forward, the thickness of this thing gets thinner, so it less can hit it. There's less substance to it. So as you go faster, you get harder and harder to hit because less of you is going the wrong direction, perpendicular to the flow. Less resistance to, you feel less of the friction. So the faster you go, the less friction. Alright. And he just says this is all that's just garbage. It's not an explanation. I think it's an explanation. next. Okay. People can smell bullshit, right? Okay, so, but you don't smell it when it comes to the two-slit experiment nonsense, creating many worlds, Copenhagen, radar for photons, the simplest thing, the simplest element in the universe has all these advanced functions. They're like little battleships with all kinds of fancy functions. You know, that little things pop out of them, and they do all kinds of magical stuff. That doesn't smell like bullshit. The fact that you have a simple concept of the inverse square law, which is the gravity gets stronger and stronger as you get closer and closer, that proves bent space. Because there's absolutely no other evidence of bent space besides the inverse square law. What's your other evidence? Where's your other evidence of bent space? If it wasn't for the existence of the fact that bent space can be drawn as a curved line that you can make look like a well, what other evidence is there? Oh, that's right, absolutely no other evidence. And you can't smell that bullshit. So I would argue that most people can't smell bullshit from miles away. That's why most people are religious kooks. A lot of people who aren't religious kooks believe in UFOs because they're stupid and they can't smell bullshit. You're the people that can't smell bullshit. And that's why I have to make this stupid argument. And the worst thing is not only can't you smell bullshit, you can't even be instructed on the rules of smelling bullshit. Which is, you don't jump to conclusions on weak evidence, which you have done over and over and over again. And all you've done is say, I love my eggheads. My eggheads are the truth. They were there. They saw Jesus walk on the water. They didn't. They weren't there. They didn't see Jesus walk on any water. You're just such a fucking piece of shit. This rhetoric is such garbage. And that's exactly why you were kicked off those forums. No, I wasn't kicked off forums in some sort of way. I already showed what I typed, what I left as messages, totally unoffensive beyond the point of saying, yes, I know you don't want to have conversations about the possibility that you have some errors in your supermodel, but yeah, I'd like to discuss some of those, and they weren't interested. And instead of just saying, no, we're not interested, but maybe if somebody wants to talk about it, they can. I'll put a little notice on your post saying this isn't a proper subject somehow, but I'll let people who want to talk about it. No, instead their fear, forces them to delete the subject. Like it never, can't even be asked. You can't even ask, can I have a conversation? No. So again, their fear was shown. Why do you delete a comment that has absolutely not one single insult in it, one sort of derogatory, not a single ad hominem in it? Why do you delete it? What's their fear? You come here with fuck you written as your fucking screen name, douchebag. I didn't do that, asshole. Let's see, ever heard the phrase that if you're smelling shit, you should tell the person to check their shoes? But if you're smelling shit all day, you should check your own shoes. No, I never heard that. That sounds a little bit long for a cliche statement. So whatever. I mean, if you don't check your own shoes first, you're fucking retarded. So if you smell shit and you haven't already checked your own shoes, you're pretty retarded. Anyway, you can't even deal with the case of dark matter consistently. Now this is got to be an insane comment, right? I mean, first off, why should I have to deal with it in any way whatsoever, as there's absolutely zero evidence for it? If there's not enough evidence for it, no, there's not any evidence for it, then it can't be used as evidence of their theories don't work. I didn't use it. I'm not the one who invented it. They did, because their theories don't work. Their concession, dark matter, do you really think dark matter would exist as a theory or a proposal if their math worked for galaxies? And if their math worked for gravitational lensing? If the math worked all perfectly without it, do you think the conversation would exist? The only reason why the conversation about dark matter exists is because their devoted God theory needs a Holy Ghost. It needs an extra component to fix it. It doesn't work without the Holy Ghost. They have a role that's nobody to read the script. They need the dark matter script in their play, because their play can't work without it. That's why it exists, shithead. I didn't suggest dark matter. It's not my responsibility. I'm not the one who said their math sucks, they need dark matter. I didn't say that. I didn't impose this on them. They imposed it on themselves. It's their own concession. Our theory's broken. The only way we can make it make any sense, we have to create an invisible man that committed the murder. They're going into a courtroom and that's all they're doing. They're just saying, look, we can't figure out who did it because everybody seems innocent. So it must be that this invisible man came in and he did this and this and this. And that's why it looks this way. That's why the evidence looks this way. That's them, not me. God, you're insane. You're really literally insane. Okay. If there's not enough evidence for it, then it can't be used as evidence that their theories don't work. Again, I'm not using it as evidence. They've already conceded that their theories don't work, idiot. I don't have to argue that point. They've already conceded it by using dark matter to fix their mathematics. So that issue can't even be in dispute. They've already conceded their math doesn't work. Fuck, you don't even understand that simple truth? You really think there's some other reason besides broken mathematics that they came up with the idea there must be some matter in the universe that we can't see that's creating magic gravity? You really think that happened somewhere, idiot? Even though you think you replicate bent space anyhow. Even though you think you replicate bent space anyhow. Amazing. I replicate the inverse square law. Why would I replicate an abstraction that poorly illustrates it in the sense that it's not even a three-dimensional model? Bent space is a stupid way to even describe the fucking thing because that's not what it's doing in reality. In the three-dimensional world, it's vacuum space. It's not bent space. It's extraction space. The idea is this space at the speed of light is contracted. It's reduced in its size. And somehow the matter has to obey the absence of space. It's space. It's in space annihilation. It's annihilation space. It's not bent space. It's annihilation space. So you can't even, your theory isn't even nearly accurately described because bent space is a silly, completely not analogistic to the reality. In three dimensions, there is no way to bend space. All you can do is annihilate space. So, you're such an idiot. All right. You can't have both. What do I need both for? I don't have any need to create dark energy, or dark matter, because I don't believe that I have to change the internal function of the universe to account for a few funky images by the Hubble telescope. I don't believe photons are bent by gravity, because I don't believe any force is bent by any other force anywhere in the universe. And there's no evidence of any other force being bent by any other force except photons being bent by gravity. That's it. In the entire universe, there's no evidence that any other force could possibly bend another force except this one. And you have this terrible evidence, terribly weak evidence, that isn't consistent with your own gravitational theories, not even consistent with Newton's theories. Doesn't make any sense unless you create dark matter. That's the only way you make the photos make any sense, is to create invisible man gravity. And your reaction is to defend the creation of the dark matter rather than ask the simple question, well, maybe they have that thing wrong. Maybe those images are just remnants of something that exploded. That's why they're blue shifted. See, there's counter evidence that sort of gives it away, that most of the lensed images, the stuff being lensed is the wrong color. It doesn't fit. It's out of place in the sense that it's shifted the wrong color. Why would it be shifted? Well, if it's moving because it was part of remnants from an explosion, well, that would explain why it's shifted in color, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. But no, you don't want to hear any of that, because that's evolution, and you're a religious kook, and you'll always be a religious kook. Okay, got it. Alright. You can't have both, numbnut. So again, I'm the numbnut claiming to have both when, no, I'm saying I don't need bent space. I don't need dark matter, because I don't believe the things they believe. I don't think galaxies are contracting. I think galaxies are expanding. They don't even understand that galaxies are flat and that changes their gravitational profile. They're not spheres, galaxies. They're flat, like pancakes. They don't even get that. Alright, you can't have it both. Again, I don't have it both, and I've explained the difference between flat galaxies and spherical objects and how they produce gravity. And the fact that you're so inconsistent, again, a claim where you produce zero evidence of my inconsistency. So just lie. You're just such a compulsive, lying piece of scum. To switch between both narratives every so often shows you are just an insane, raving lunatic. So again, there's absolutely no evidence of that. You know, may I get cancer if I'm lying immediately. You know, there's no evidence of any inconsistency on the subject of dark matter. I always thought it was stupid. I've always said it was stupid. It's just made up. It's a silly idea. It's just absolutely nonsensical. We have a whole different form of matter that's in this secret, invisible form. I mean, it's just as God of the gaps as you can possibly get as a theory. I mean, you just can't get more obviously God of the gaps. This is just an invented fairy tale, and that's all it is. Not a shred of evidence for it, except the fact that your God theory doesn't work without it. That's it. No other reason to have it except to preserve your biblical story. Alright, so anyway, I don't think there's any other comments by him. Okay, so I'll properly dispose of the rudeness. Fuck you. Fuck you. Alright, Michael Falwell. Hi Gary, I think you nailed it when you said the Three Bears story works, then sell it. Just think how much revenues is made year in, year out. I don't care about that. It sells so much in other areas of humanity. Well, that's really not the point either. Look, these are scientists, so I'm not saying they're just in it for the money. What I'm saying is they actually believe in this shit. All right. I mean, those silly LIGO scientists. One of those guys got the Nobel Prize, I think, and he was a consultant on the film Interstellar. And that's really what he thinks. I think he actually thinks that's how the universe works. That love makes the giant tidal waves that don't affect you. The gravity that makes the giant wave, you can stand right next to it, no gravity, and that you can actually have gravity that would cause 7-year time dilation in 1 hour. 1 hour, you have 7 years of time dilation, and that's velocity. So that planetoid would have to go around that black hole so fucking fast. It'd have to be an insane speed it was traveling, and how the spaceship ever even got anywhere close to being able to land on something going as fast as a bullet is retarded. And the whole thing is just such a pile of nonsense, and just it illustrates what they are. They're not liars. They're idiots. They're silly, fucktarded, phantasmagorical mathematicians. They have no love of mechanical science. They have a love for their mathematics. They don't give a shit about the beauty of a mechanical device. They're in love with made-up fantasy Rube Goldberg. They won't make a real Rube Goldberg device out of real material things. They can only imagine the world as some sort of floaty boaty bullshit where you fly into wormholes and go into another galaxy, and in that other galaxy you go into a black hole, and somehow it ends up being in your daughter's bookcase. I mean, it's just such a pile of fucking shit, and that's what they really believe, because they're silly nerds. Alright, the establishment is not concerned with correctness or true facts of the matter. Well, look, I'm not even... the establishment is... the government officials are too stupid to scrutinize the physics, right? The government doesn't hire some brilliant physicist to scrutinize what kind of bullshit it'll finance. Alright, so, yeah, they might have some smart guys at NASA, and maybe they should be making a few more decisions. I don't know. But somewhere, yeah, it obviously doesn't work that they spend all this incredible amount of money on two of the most obscure pieces of physics. I mean, this idiotic gravity wave bullshit and this idiotic super collider crap. that is just so all theoretical mush, you're never going to be able to smear it on your broccoli sandwich. I mean, they're not even going to make a good mayonnaise out of all of this wasted money. Alright, they're selling humanity down the river, but the really tragic part of this is the establishment is the supplier, but only because there is a demand to be supplied to. Again, I don't think it has anything to do with that. Like I said, I think it has to do with the religiosity of the average human. He won't look at evolution in any kind of real sense. People will watch all these poor little animals get ground up and they just pretend my dog is important, but somehow that squirrel outside is not. It's totally irrational. They're incapable of fucking rationally looking at anything without putting their phantasmagorical special bookcase, love bullshit and mixing it into their physics. And that's all this is an example of. They're children in terms of how they think about reality. They're still 13 years old and they're still wishing for a magical universe. I wanted to ask about the magnet as a gravity filter too. Gravity makes its effects apparent on all forms of matter. Yes, but I want to ask, when the magnet segregates the gravity, the force only seems to react strongly with magnetic elements as opposed to other materials. Yes, that's because the filter makes magnetism, but it's also the only thing that can feel the segregation is something that's likewise magnetic. So it has to have the repulsive electrons in the same configuration. I mean, the repulsion between the protons and the electrons have to be, they can't feel each other if they're still mixed. So again, the idea is that mixed force goes in. So we'll just do this one way just for the sake of, I looked at changing it, but I didn't change it. And this image has to go forward. Alright, so that's fixed. And then I gotta go this up one. Alright, so you have the mixed force. The magnet converts the force into this. Probably should have done it the other way around, but it doesn't. I guess I just turn this around. Do it in the proper procedural order. Okay, so it starts here this way. 1. Second step, 2. It's now segregated. Now, segregation wouldn't matter. So say if I put a regular piece of matter here, so I'll draw a regular piece of matter here, let's say. Now the trick with regular pieces of matter is they're black, red, black, red, black, red inside. Okay, so they're mixed. So you can sort of understand that stuff that's all mixed, not polarized. Alright, when this force hits it, it's exactly the same as if the force was back to being mixed again. The segregation of the force means absolutely nothing if it's hitting a mixed element. But if I put a magnet here next to this magnet, that is likewise, this is the polarized side, and this is polarized. Then you can see that it's black on black, which is all reflections, and it's red on red, which is all reflections. So now the magnet can affect magnetic material. It can't affect non-magnetic. So it's just gravity this way. So the two magnets are still gravitationally doing exactly what they were doing before. I mean, gravity still works exactly the way it worked before. The only point is that gravity's been magnified in through the segregation. So it's exactly the same number of red and black arrows are hitting. It's just that now they're hitting red on red and black on black. And that magnifies the force, the effect. And so these objects will be repelled. And if I turn this magnet over, then they'll be attracted. And so, I hope that explains. I mean, that's brief. I mean, I'm just going to make it brief because you should be able to get it. When it's mixed, even if you segregate the force, it can't have an effect because it's mixed. It's still chaos. It has to be order against order. It has to be filter against filter to have an effect. All right. All right. next. Oh, last one. Good. Keep this short, maybe. Maybe I'll have time for some Ken Wheeler fun. I hate to say it, but you're basically looked at as a caged orangutan, confused about the state of affairs. Well, again, that's, coming from you, anonymous coward. So you're looked at as anonymous coward. That's how I personally look at you. Anonymous coward, afraid to put your name on any of these insults. You have no integrity. I mean, at least Ken Wheeler's face is on his insults. Now, the fact that he's insulting a bunch of dead people who can't fight back is really cowardice of him. But you're the coward here, because you're going to make all these statements, and you put up nothing. You have no credentials. You've demonstrated no, lucidity in the sense of knowing the subject in a deep way. You've demonstrated nothing except that you can write insults. And that's it. It's really funny seeing you actually question why anyone rejects your ideas. Well, it's sort of funny me watching you people downrate things, okay, play your little games like you're actually signing into different accounts just for this purpose. It's really funny that I am so controlling you. So yeah, I get a little bit of a laugh out of that. Why do everyone? So that's you actually question why do everyone. So that's how he writes a sentence. Rejects your ideas. It's does. Why does everyone? But do you think it's everyone? And do you think if one of you people had actually the courage to have a fair fight? Like I said, I'm inviting anyone who wants to defend conventional physics to do a live room, and they can defend dark matter. And they can defend how much evidence they've used for all these conclusions. And they can defend the two-slit experiment, why the math doesn't actually work. And then they can explain how an interferometer works. And they can tell me where they think the photons are interfering with themselves. They can show me on a diagram where they think the magic little happening happens, where the photon splits in half and interferes with itself. All right. Why is everyone so insistent on waves? That's my question. So I'll read this whole question again. It's really funny seeing you actually question why do everyone rejects your ideas. That's how you wrote it. Why is everyone so insistent on waves? Well, those are two different questions I'm asking. First, I don't ask why people are rejecting it. I've already explained that. It's because you're all fabulists. You're all children dependent on a fantasy story. And the idea of living in a kind of a crude, mechanical, deterministic world scares the fuck out of you, apparently. Do they want a singularity? They clearly want physics to be more magical. They clearly want it to have leprechauns in it because they keep putting them in. They keep inventing grand stories. Again, to create a multiverse to explain the two-slit experiment. A little bit of a funky phenomenon takes place, right? And clearly it happened all the way back in Newton's day. And nobody in Newton's day was jumping. Well, Newton did believe in angels, but he certainly didn't write that in a paper. He certainly didn't write for publication, I suggest that maybe angels are doing it. They're creating Newton's rings. You didn't do that, but you people are willing to. All right. You actually genuinely wonder about about that with real curiosity. Well, again, I'm not terribly curious. I've always had a low opinion of human beings, and you people are just verifying how you are just incredibly incompetent, stupid, obnoxious, dogmatic, fascist pieces of shit. And you're just demonstrating it over and over again. You'll cheat and you'll lie. You don't give a fuck about integrity or a fair fight. You're just despicable pieces of crap. And yes, I'm going to be very proud. I might not live to see it, but I'm very proud of the fact that I'm exposing you for what you creeps are. All right, and I will win in the end. Okay, my side will win. Your side is going to lose. And it should lose because you've demonstrated no integrity, no honesty, no anything decent. You're creepy trolls, for fuck's sake, defending babble, okay? And you're doing it, like I said, so dishonestly where you can't even admit simple things like, yeah, some of the evidence for our theories is weak. You can't even say that. You're so lame. Alright, and you have no self-awareness to help yourself. Well, again, says you, anonymous coward, who I would argue has no universal awareness or self-awareness. You can't even figure out that lying sucks. You're so pathetic. You haven't been very good at presenting other people's arguments. Well, point it out. Show me how I've been the one distorting the evidence, where you people, like, show me where, yes, it was totally appropriate for Piro to show that stupid wave video where it was garbage in for garbage out, where they created waves interfering with each other in the source, and then said, look, see, they interfere with each other on the outcome, when they ruined the source waves. And you're saying that's an honest presentation of reality. Again, your dishonesty, I've demonstrated it. I can't do any more than that. And the fact that you people are so dishonest, you won't even admit your own dishonesty. You won't even admit that, oh yeah, that's cheating. That was bullshit. You won't even say, yes, that was bullshit. So it's not something anyone should spend much energy on back if there's no favor to return. Well, clearly you're spending plenty of energy, you little haters. First, you're watching videos you don't see any value in, and then you're making arguments that can't possibly have an effect on me. I mean, they're completely absent of anything called any kind of reasoning or evidence, and yet you think you're going to just be able to insult me into feeling bad and saying, oh, I have to shut down because the guy says I'm stupid or I'm a monkey. He says so, so I must have to believe that. And what is your evidence? Oh, that's right, absolutely nothing except to prove my very point. To prove that this idiot calling somebody a caged orangutan is a compulsive liar. And I prove you're a compulsive liar. I show it over and over again how you can't paraphrase an argument or describe it, any single one of the arguments being made, honestly, ever. So who's the monkey in the cage? Who's the one with the psychological damage that seems quite obvious? How have you presented something that should logically impact me in some kind of way where I say, oh yeah, that might be true? Where? That's right, nowhere. You're just writing this slop because you think the people watching the video are average, stupid, cunt humans. And you're probably correct. They'll probably fall for lines like that because they're so fucking stupid. We live in a shitty world because people are shitty. That's just a fact. They're too stupid to confine their own stink. They think they're entitled to everything, and they don't have to think about how to make it or how to do it efficiently. They don't care how many little animals get ground up in the making of their little hamburgers. They just couldn't give a shit about anything, especially the truth or integrity or honesty. That's why the politics is so full of liars, because they don't even pass a law that says lying politicians should be drawn and quartered in the public square. They should be killed for fun. They don't even have the integrity to do that. Somebody's basically a traitor to your United States Constitution. They use their positions of power to violate your constitutional rights, and you don't even have the guts to kill them. That's how lame you people are. Alright, so fuck you. Jeez. So again, he came back with nothing. I gave him his chance, right? I read his last comment, went through the whole explanations, explained, and he's got nothing. He didn't show up here with honesty and an argument of integrity. He didn't explain how his evidence is strong, right? I said, look, my major argument is your evidence is weak. Did he say something that explained how that fundamental argument is flawed or wrong? That somehow this evidence of Copenhagen and many worlds and multi-dimensional things, that time is a dimension, that the evidence is overwhelming, that no rational person could dispute the evidence that time is a dimension and you can warp it. And the evidence is what? Oh, there's a correlation between velocity and time dilation. That's the extent of your evidence for this whole theory that time is a dimension. I mean, fuck you. Jesus. hate these fucking pieces of crap. Alright, so let's see, shall we do the Theora shit for brains? I should make a separate video, but I can title it properly, so I guess we'll wait. But I mean, his last few videos have just been hilarious. He says absolutely nothing, and you know, it's just amazing, you know, that he can make such arrogant declarations about what things are, and what he's describing, it has no, there's no texture, there's nothing you can hold on to. It doesn't give you any kind of description of the reality. It's all just some sort of magic. So anyway, I mean, fields versus matter. See, so again, he just doesn't get it right. It's forces versus matter. There's fields, there's just, you know, well, whatever. And this is coming from an idiot who's an ether theorist. So again, why even... Well, I guess he's saying there's no matter, there's just fields. Fields of what? Ether. Oh. Never mind. Yeah, too silly. So anyway, enough of a video. So, till the next time, and such. Yeah, that's enough. I mean, people are just obnoxious. Oops. I didn't mean to hit start streaming. That was a mistake. Yeah. Hope I didn't fuck up the video. I hope you didn't.